everyone.
Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to our third session in our Neurodiversity Series that was organized by Dr. Diana Parry-Cruwys and Dr. Jason Clemence. And today we have two additional facilitators with us from the Center for Instructional Innovation, Dr. Ericka Hollis and Dr. Diana Perdue. So two Dianas working with us today. So I'm really glad to see you all here today. We're going to be talking specifically in this session about the Universal Design for Learning framework. And I'm going to just turn it over now to Ericka and Diana to get us started.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to start us off, and Ericka is going to finish us off because in about 30 minutes, I'll have to get off our call to go give lunch and medication to my mom. So I have the first half and she has the second half. However, this is very much a team approach, and you will tell that whenever we really get into it. The plan is, and maybe it's a good time for a true confession kind of thing here. So in typical fashion for me, when I first realized, I'll have about 30 minutes with these folks, I prepared probably the equivalent of a 3-credit-hour course worth of material, right? And so what I want to start by telling you is, at the end and in the follow-up email that you'll get from us, you will get some additional resources. So what I want to say to you right now is, here in the beginning, we fully expect that everybody is eating your lunch like you're supposed to be. So being off camera, being muted is perfectly okay right now. We want you to eat and relax. And know that the content will be available to you after the fact. So you don't have to, frantically write notes or take screenshots or any of that kind of stuff. It will all be provided for you as we go. So I'm going to share my screen here in just a second. Before I do, though, I just wanted to mention that when I share my screen, I will not have access to your faces or to the chat anymore. So I'm going to rely on Diana, Jason, Ericka, and Christine to let me know if somebody is completely confused or asking some question. Feel free to just unmute and tell me, interrupt. I don't mind at all, will not be offended in any way. And really what we want is to present you with this overview, a detailed overview about the Universal Design for Learning and how it relates to the neurodiversity needs that we've been talking about in kind of parts 1 and 2, for those of you who have attended the previous Lunch and Learn sessions. And also, I, in particular, want to leave you with one little strategy that you can use going forward. I'm one of these people that at the end of a presentation, I like to have that one thing that I can really use and do something with at the end. So, and Ericka and I both are in cahoots in helping to encourage that by also having a little homework assignment for you at the very end. Okay, so is everybody ready? Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen. Does everybody see that first slide? And if somebody could give me a verbal yes, since I can't see you anymore.
Oh, yeah, good. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. So as I said, this is the presentation really that will accompany the more detailed resource that we've created for you in the form of a RISE micro lesson on supporting neurodiverse needs through UDL. So we're going to put that link in the chat for you to the whole lesson. And we're also going to give it to you in an email after the fact. And our agenda really is we're going to talk about the 3 parts, if you will, to the Universal Design for Learning, but we're going to do it in what we hope is a much more interactive dynamic, collaborative kind of way. So we're going to be talking about engagement in the form of using some technology tools. We're going to be making the connections between these components of universal design for learning and the various neurodiversity needs that may come up. And specifically, the one thing that we're going to talk about in some detail and maybe try out some scenarios with is this technique from Tufts University called +1. And that's where the practice is going to come in. And then we're going to end the whole thing with a Q&A. So does that sound like a good agenda for everybody? Are we all on board? Everybody, we got buy-in?
Terrific, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so for this part, I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a second so you can jot down the code if you need to. And I'm sure Ericka is probably also putting it in the chat. But we want you to respond to a couple of questions on Slido. And so I'm going to leave the QR code up here for just a second if you want to use that method, or if you want to go to slido.com and then the code UDL. And in a second, I'm going to stop sharing so that Ericka can share to show us the results. So I'm going to give you just another second or two, leave this on here. Have I given everybody enough time to jot those things down if you're jotting it down, or to take the picture with your phone if you're going that route, that I can stop sharing? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to stop. Ericka, I will turn it over to you to let you give them the amount of time that you'd like, and also to take over sharing whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I've already started sharing. So if anyone is joining late or needed a little bit more time, the way to get to our engagement activity that we're doing is slido.com, and then type in UDL. And UDL, as we know, we're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail, stands for Universal Design for Learning. Okay, so who is ready for some interaction? Your first question is, what are some things that we often do out of habit that are not inclusive? So I can see that 2 people are typing. You may also say, guys, ooh, nice. And I have this interaction set up so the answers are going to come in as people are typing. Asking everyone to rise is a good one. Diana says she's guilty of saying guys. I feel like us Southerners tend to say y'all more, so we get away with it just because I default mostly to y'all. One of my colleagues uses folks a lot, and it's weird to me to just call people folks, but it works because it is an inclusive term. Okay, relying too much on the standard way of doing things, not having closed caption for video and PowerPoints and things like that. Yes. Assuming one method of communication is great for all. Talking fast. Not using slides or describing images. Saying guys. Lecture for long periods. Showing video clips without thinking about students with auditory differences. That's a great one. Asking cold questions, asking everyone to rise and say guys. It looks like one more person is typing, and I just want to give people, 2 more people are still typing, a chance. Folks and y'all are great. Thanks, Jason. Making neurotypical the default and everyone else other or extra. These are great. And they're going to help with the discussion that we're going to have today and some of the framework when we start talking about it. Okay, let's go to the next one. In one word or phrase, what matters to you most in an ideal learning environment? AKA, what do you need to be successful as a learner? Flexibility, time, spirited engagement, approachable teacher. And this is in the form of a word cloud. So if people are saying the same thing, it kind of makes that one bigger. Community building, time, attention, support, time to process.
Ericka, if we are we imagining ourselves as the learner in this context?
You are.
Okay.
Yep. An approachable teacher. Oh, wow. That's really saying something. That's what people really need. Clear directions, learner participation. And also, if you are unable to do the Slido, feel free to put that also in the Zoom chat. Engagement. These are all great. Welcoming, I really like that one. That tracks with our mission and who we are. Time frame, calm and friendly, community. I see community on here actually twice. Flexibility is now, I feel like it's a contender for number 1. Okay, these are all great. I'm not sure what ND affirming means.
Neurodiverse.
Oh, okay. I don't use like the 2 letters for that in my mind. I always say the word. So thanks for that. I learned something. Okay.
To be honest, that wasn't my entry. I was just guessing.
Okay. It tracks though, right?
Yeah, I think it probably is what they meant.
I'm gonna go with it. And if that person would like to clarify if that is not the word, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. Okay, and our third question is a multiple choice question. So how familiar are you with Universal Design for Learning, the framework? Ooh, somebody's on it. Well, I'm happy to learn that for some people it's completely new and that we also have people that are familiar with it. So this may be new information for some of you, and don't worry, we have tools and things that we can definitely share with you, and we have takeaways for you. For those of you who are familiar, I would really invite you into the conversation as well, because we're going to be thinking about UDL with a neurodiversity lens as we walk through and think about what we're going to be talking about today. So it's important that we be able to hear from everyone, because your ideas are just as good as ours. We just happen to be the people that are facilitating this session today, but I could have tapped probably any of you, giving you the basic tenets, and you probably just would have come up with something different, right? So we're at about 18 people, which is not a bad response rate with 26 people in the room, and a couple of us are hosting, so I don't think we are participating. So we are at about 50% familiar, 56% familiar, and about the same for a completely new and not very familiar. And then some of us are at very familiar with the 11%. Wonderful. So I am going to stop sharing, and I thank you all for your participation. Oh, it's still moving, 20%. Oh, you all know I love 90% completion rates. That's kind of like one of my favorite numbers, but it doesn't always work out that way. But here we are. I will stop sharing now and turn it back over to you, Diana, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. I had to laugh at you were thinking the exact same thing I was when I started seeing such a big response that are already familiar with Universal Design for Learning. I'm like, great, co-teachers, right? More folks to jump in and participate with what we're going to talk about. Okay, I'm going to share my screen back again. And I wanted to start with this quote that I felt like was really good because it gives the big picture, right? And so what it says is Universal Design for Learning. The acronym is UDL, so you might hear us refer to it as UDL throughout this. It's an approach to providing instruction aimed at meeting the needs of all participants in a learning environment. And it's based on these three primary principles of providing multiple means of engagement, action expression, and representation. And the rest of the quote, which I stopped it here for the purposes of our slide, but the rest of this quote I feel like is really important. So I'm just going to say it to you. These principles lay the foundation to approaches that address all learners' needs. And it's vital that it seeks to accommodate not just those who are neurodiverse, but anyone to help achieve their potential and aspirations. And the reason I liked the second half of that quote is because it points out something that I feel like is really important, that this is not a thing, Universal Design for Learning, that we're emphasizing for you purely for the purposes of our discussion about neurodiversity, even though it does apply and it is relevant. But this is a thing that we're discussing with you because it applies to everyone. It can help everyone, whether they're neurodiverse or not. And so the three components that are listed here on this quote, we also have here on this slide, the components of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And what I like to think about with this from my own personal experience, for years and years and years, I was a math education professor at various colleges, and as such, a member of NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And one of the big things that I remember hearing about from that organization and through my research and when I was working on my PhD and then when I was teaching is their concept of multiple means of representation. And they refer to it at the time in talking about different ways to assess, right? Different ways to provide for students to show us what they know. And I feel like UDL, the Universal Design for Learning, takes that concept, but expands it across these three windows of engagement, representation, and action and expression. So you notice that I have a few little components of each of these. There's actually a great detailed website from CAST that we will be giving you the links to, and there are subsections on engagement, representation, and action and expression that we can put in the chat for you as well. But the components that are listed here, the thing that I would like to communicate to you is the idea is to offer options, to offer choices, to offer different ways, right, to do these things. So for example, engagement, offering different ways to keep the student engaged, offering different ways to stimulate interest, to gain their attention, to increase their motivation. For representation, offering different ways, perhaps in the form of an assessment or the assignment, different ways to illustrate and teach the thing that you're talking to them about. And for action and expression, different ways for the students to perform this act of learning, right? Whether it's, as it's listed here, physical action, whether you're asking them to stand up in front of class and give a presentation versus use their phone and record a presentation, right? So the idea is for this framework, we want to now take these concepts and put that through the lens of students, learners with neurodiverse needs. And to do that, I really liked this quote from Tom Tobin about this notion of +1. So what he says, UDL is really just +1 thinking. For every interactions that learners have now with the material, with each other, with instructors, with the world, this part in italics, really important, provide one more way for that interaction to happen. The +1 approach helps take what otherwise might look like an insurmountable amount of effort and break it down into manageable, approachable chunks. It also helps people to determine where to start applying the UDL framework so they can address current challenges and pain points in their interactions. And I really liked this quote because +1, like that feels doable to me, you know. Often for myself as a participant in things like this, when I'm taught a new thing like UDL, I remember the first time I learned about it, you know, my first instinct was, oh God, another new thing that I have to like redo all my stuff and try to make it fit in this new thing, right? And so what I like about this +1 is just like he's talking about here, breaking an insurmountable thing into manageable, approachable chunks. That's what I feel like this does for us. It gives us a technique to start making these changes that are important and appropriate and needed, but to do it in a manageable way that doesn't feel overwhelming and impossible. So, you know, maybe from this, you need a couple of examples. So I liked this little screenshot table that the Tufts University site had. And if you notice, they just kind of give these 3 examples. I thought maybe we could just look at them together for a minute before we try a scenario and try to apply it ourselves. So, for example, the course component of the course goals and objectives, that thing is normally, under the traditional approach, normally just stated in our syllabus, right? And a +1 approach might be to have an illustration, a diagram of how those goals are related and intersect with each other. So, you know, that diagram might be a more visual approach than what's normally in the syllabus, right? This bulleted list kind of thing. For the instructional design example, you know, the traditional 50-minute lecture, and for some of us, we're being generous with 50 minutes, right? Some of us, it's well over an hour lecture. And so the +1 approach to that might be to break that lecture into smaller intervals. So they use 15 minutes and then allow a couple of minutes in between for either a group reflection or a discussion or just a little bit of a brain break before you move into the next piece. And then the last example, visual representation of content. Usually it's, you know, exactly what I'm doing to you right now, slides presented during class, right? So a +1 approach to that is really simple. We could have emailed you this PowerPoint ahead of time so that you could have access to it initially to be able to review it before, you know, we went through this together. So I hope these examples give you an idea about this technique. I encourage you later, when you have some time, to review the resources that we're going to give you. If you want to learn about this approach in a little bit more detail and sort of read some more of the examples that they have, because they're really useful. But what I thought would be good now is to come back to what we did earlier, right? So when Ericka did the Slido activity with you all with technology, we were using that, as you see here, as an engagement activity, right? We were trying to find a way to allow for you to eat and be off camera while we were talking in the beginning, but also to be engaged. And then we also wanted something that we could come back to here to ask this question. given what we did to you at the beginning with the Slido engagement activity, how could we modify what we did to better support people with neurodiverse needs? So let me just pause right here for a second and stop sharing so I can see you for a minute. And before I go to this next little piece, and let me also ask Ericka and Christine, do we want to pause right here and get a little feedback, or do we want to go as planned and sort of give some examples and then discuss it? Because I feel like we have some experts in the room, right? We could ask for some feedback right now, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So do I need to share it again, or can we do it right now where we can see everybody? I see a couple of Ericka saying her internet is unstable, so we're gonna we're gonna move with that. So feel free, either put it in the chat or unmute, raise your hand. Tell us what you're thinking, give us some feedback. I turn it over.
I just want to recognize Mara's what she wrote in the chat. Maybe provide the questions in advance with an option to respond in advance or at least prep. Jim says provide new technologies ahead of time with instructions and a sample activity. It's wonderful. And you all can unmute. You can unmute and talk. That's perfectly fine too.
Yeah, we're not worried that people are going to talk over each other. Just feel free to jump in. Did I see somebody with a hand up, or was that just a thumbs up that yes, we wanted to do it? Sorry, the screen is moving all over here, so if I've missed you.
Also, one thing to do, I know I was 10 minutes late, so I missed the activity, and it was nice that you kind of summarized it, but even you could put that in the chat so that those, so, oh, in these 10 minutes, we just went over the syllabus and da-da-da. I hate to, I used to hate to do that. And then I realized it's actually really nice for the people who were in the class to have, oh yeah, that's what we did in these last 10 minutes. And I was, figuring out what we were having for dinner. And so that kind of thing is good, and trying to do that every 15 minutes or so.
Such a fantastic point, Becky. I agree with you completely. All right, let me, you all did great with that. I am going to go back to sharing my screen and show you what we came up with. So exactly what Jim mentioned, right? Modeling how to respond, preferably ahead of time, right? Or maybe doing like a low stakes version of it before we're doing it in class. We kind of did this towards the end, but allowing chat or an oral response as a substitute option, exactly what somebody said a second ago in the chat, providing the questions in advance. And I don't think anybody mentioned this, but one thing that we could do to +1 this, waiting to show results until everyone has responded. So this example we thought would be good to sort of together with you do a +1. We'd like to maybe move it to one more level with our next scenario. And I will probably be stopping after this one and turning it over to the rest of my team for this part. But the idea is the same, right? So here's our scenario under the category of representation. We're talking about a complex task. So think about your subject area and think about this situation. You have a complex concept that learners have to master to be successful in your course. And we want to think about +1 ways that we could introduce this concept to support neurodiversity in our teaching practices, and also ways that maybe we can +1 reiterating the concept and sort of the enrichment and engagement piece to go more in depth. Because remember, It's a complex concept. So let me stop sharing right here so I can get back to you all and say, I hate to give you a problem and run, but that's exactly what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Ericka. Thankfully, we have Christine here in case Ericka's unstable internet continues to be a problem. They will pick it up from here. I am going to watch the remaining part in the recording, so I'm all up to speed in case any of you email me about anything after the fact. But I just want to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your attention. And I already know you're going to give great answers to these scenarios. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine and Ericka.
All right. Thank you again, Diana. You're getting a lot of thanks in the chat.
Thanks, Diana.
So thank you, Diana. We really appreciate it. So thank you, Ericka. You've just put the scenario there. Would you like me to share my screen so that, you know, if you have the unstable internet?
Sure. I am in my office. I just want to point it out. I don't know what may or may not happen, but I am on campus. So what do you all think about the scenario there? I see a couple of suggestions already. Clarify how many words. Yes, that's good. Break it down into simple steps as much as possible and provide lots of different examples, small group exercises to generate more examples. That's a great idea, Alan. And then I also see from Trisha, break into smaller groups or concepts to scaffold. What else are you all thinking? You heard that? I say y'all, not even y'all that time.
Y'all. I think as far as teaching at the doctoral level online, that and in medicine or nursing, it's always traditionally been, you know, the weaker do not survive, so to speak. And, you know, we know that, you know, the traditional thinking has always been, well, so many of you will never pass this course. I've had people actually get up and say that. So to consider this in that framework where we're creating a proposal for a research project, I sometimes find that it's important, whether it's required or not, to Zoom individually with students that need a little bit more explanation of what's going on. And we also do drop in office hours, and also I do group meetings so that any question is welcome, just to clarify, you know, and make sure everyone's on the right path. So the one-to-one Zooms seem to really do it.
Thanks, Celeste. Thank you for speaking. Other thoughts and ideas, or feel free to unmute yourself or speak in the chat or type in the chat. One of the things I was thinking about was actually providing a video of the complex concept and put it inside of the LMS so that the students can refer to it multiple times during the semester. And hopefully that video does have closed captioning, and so people can look at it in that kind of way. But if it can also just be downloaded as a like an MP3 file where people can listen to it, was one of the things that I was thinking about. I see that Jason has typed something here. For writing-based tasks, provide a template or lead-in phrase to help students get started and circumvent the dreaded tyranny of blank pages. Yes, that would be nice, with the caveat that once they've gotten their idea written out, they revise so it's no longer reads like a written template. I think that's great. Jason, would you like to say more, or is that?
Sure. It's basically the idea that a lot of students have ideas kicking around that are really good and could probably be developed into something really interesting, but they don't know how to start writing it. So in my EN 211 course, which is basically introduction to literary studies, for both their midterm and final, I tell them, just if you can't come up with a thesis, think about what you think is the most interesting thing you took from this story, poem, whatever, and consider writing your thesis as, on the surface, this story blank, but on a deeper level, blank. Like that's it, right? And just by saying now fill in those blanks instead of having to start from literally just a blank page and blinking cursor, they can do it fast. I say, okay, now take that idea that you just wrote, but revise it so it doesn't sound like it was written with a cheesy template. But so it does double duty. It helps them get going. It helps with productivity, but it also is a nice lesson in revision to express an idea from sort of, awkward or stilted or overly formal and turgid sounding to, stylistic and nice.
Nice. Thanks for that explanation, Jason.
Sure.
What are other people thinking? Courtney wrote, also sometimes template-based writing is totally fine, especially in professional context. That's absolutely correct. Ooh, Becky, I like the tie into the belongingness. Becky says explicitly talking about belongingness, kind of the opposite of X number. Then things started moving and I lost it. Number of students who won't pass this course is giving them tools they need to be successful, basically, and helping them break the task into doable steps, developing trust that they can get to the objectives. That's wonderful. Thank you for that, Becky. Diana says a synopsis explanation of the concept provided by someone other than me, maybe as a video, a detailed rubric, an example assignment, or a filled out rubric attached. I think that's great. These are all wonderful. Another idea I had that I wanted to share with you all is for the students to create some type of deliverable that they are explaining the complex concept, right? So let's just say, for example, we're talking about UDL right now. One of your assignments could be to explain in your words or however you want to do it. It could be a video, podcast, it could be graphical, it could be a mixed media, however you want to do it, but demonstrate to me that you know this concept and the 3 tenets of this concept. So giving students, I think Diana said it very well, giving students choice to be able to do that. They're still meeting the outcome that you need them to do. You just are framing, giving them more space to be able to do it in a way in which they can demonstrate their competency. And so there are many ways that we can demonstrate competency other than talking and sometimes other than writing. Sometimes you just have to write, and that is it. Like if you're taking a writing course, right, you have to write. If you're taking a science course, you have to do science if it's math, but there may be other opportunities and other ways before the students get to that you might be able to think about how to bring in some of these strategies that we're mentioning and some of your colleagues are mentioning. Any other thoughts?
I just, if I could, Ericka, wanted to add that this question, I think, is also really applicable to anyone here that maybe isn't teaching in a classroom right now and has to instruct somebody else on, how do you sign in to X, Y, and Z to do your job, to train somebody new, right? And so I wondered if there was anybody here that maybe has an example of something that they use or a tool that they use or a practice that they use that might not be specifically in the classroom, but is meeting these same needs.
That's a great point, Christine. Ooh, Lisa's hand went up. Ooh.
This is not mine, but it's one I just learned about this week that I thought was a great idea. I was talking to a fellow grant professional, and she works with clients. So she doesn't have, like I have with a lot of people here, kind of longstanding relationships, and I can go back to people. She'll sometimes see people in one meeting, and she said she records the meetings, and then she can listen to them multiple times. So she'll ask them a lot of questions about their project or what they want to put in their proposal, but she'll record it so she can listen to it over and over and glean things from it that she can use. And I wonder if students could use that, present that as an opportunity for them to talk to another classmate about an idea, and then record their session of talking to each other about it, and then go back to it or talk about an idea they have. Each of them takes a turn and gets so many minutes to talk about their idea for a paper, and then they can go back and listen to what they said. Their friend asked them questions and they can listen to what each other said.
I really like that. Thanks, Lisa.
I don't know if Diana mentioned it, but the tool VoiceThread is useful for that also in classroom context, right? Because if it lets you kind of record and go back and speak to something somebody else said. So it's another tool, if you haven't tried it, that does something similar there.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Christine. So this was Diana's. I'll put what Diana's suggestion was in the chat so everyone can read it. And it was VoiceThread, so you helped me remember that. So thanks, Christine. Any other thoughts or suggestions on this scenario?
It looks like Trisha made a comment there, Ericka.
I'm sorry, Trisha. If I'm doing a Zoom research consultation, I will ask the student I am working with which way they would prefer and how they learn better. I think that's a wonderful practice. If they share their screen and drive while I walk them through it, so they can get to the muscle memory to do it, or if they would prefer, if they learn better if I share my screen and take notes and watch. That's a very good practice, I would say, Trisha. We also do that in instructional design a lot when we're working with you all. Like, do you want to drive? You want me to drive? Especially if we're working on a Moodle course or working on something together. That's something that we often do. And I'm a big fan of taking notes in real time and like being able to share them and show them with people as we're doing it to kind of crowdsource them. That's something that I found helpful too. Maura, it sounds like Maura really uses this in how she is doing help desk. And I think that's great because each person has a different view and different comfort level with technology when they are coming to ask for questions. I do think that using screencasts and things like that can be very helpful for people. I do want to encourage you all to do the captioning properly, or at least give it a cursory glance, because sometimes the AI has gotten better in doing closed captionings, but it is not 100% perfect. And so you just cannot trust it to that degree. All right, these are some wonderful suggestions. Thank you all so much. I knew this was crowdsourcing was going to work. Let's see, Christine, can we maybe share the last scenario?
All right, can you see that there?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So our third scenario had to do with the action expression dimension. So the third dimension too of the UDL framework. So required student presentations. An assignment worth 20% of the course grade requires a 15-minute live presentation in front of the whole class. How could we adapt or revise this assignment to support neurodiversity in our teaching and assessment practices? So we were thinking about using this +1 technique here with a required student presentation in small groups. Do we still want to go that route, Ericka, or do you want to do the full group?
Let's just ask the group. What would you all prefer to discuss this in small groups, or would you prefer to stay together? Let me get a show of hands for small groups. Oh, stay together, stay together.
Stay together.
We'll go with that. We will stay together. How about that?
All right. I'm gonna leave this up for just a moment and then I'm gonna switch us back so we can all see each other. So you can take a moment to brainstorm on this. 20% of the course grade, 15-minute live presentation in front of the whole class.
Are we waiting to speak? Should I
Oh,
hold
please
my
jump
comment?
in.
First, I wouldn't give it 20. I don't generally give oral presentations that high a percentage, because for some students it's so painful to do. So I give it much less in my syllabus. But if I think that there's certain things that, say the research portion of it, I would give that separate credit in the syllabus, so that
students who are comfortable with doing the research part of it will, so they can't do a big fail on it. If they're too shy and they read from their notes, I always feel bad grading people down on reading from their notes. I know my colleague in communication is probably saying, what? They have to learn how to public speak, but some people really have trouble with it. And but if it's so beautifully researched, I want to give them that credit. So that's one change I would make is 20%, I think, for an oral presentation, at least for my field, I think is too high. And then I would break down the things that I would want them to do in that presentation and give those credit if I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's-
That idea of scaffolding it, certainly. Sorry, Lisa, were you following up?
I was just, I was liking something Kristen posted, which is to let people record the presentation or give presentations to smaller groups of the class. I think that's a great one.
If you're very clear on the objectives of the whole point of this is for you to articulate your thoughts and to share this. So the clearer you are on here's why we're doing this in junior SEM, they have a 7-minute presentation. And I tell them, look, you could record something ahead of time. You can even just record a voiceover, even if you don't have the technology, just, on your iPhone, go through your iPad, go through your PowerPoint slides, and then you don't have to get tongue-tied. You can take a couple different takes of it. I'm always surprised how few students actually take me up on the offers of here are the different ways of doing it. But, whether it's a Prezi or a PowerPoint or a something, and really letting them have the option and I spell it all out. They could even give a poster if they really wanted to. But again, once the first presentation goes and it's a PowerPoint, then they all seem to sort of line up behind that, and they're all quite similar.
If I could just add also, I worked with somebody who had a terrible fear of public speaking. He had such a fear of public speaking. He was a guy I hired on a grant project to be an IT support for teachers. And part of the job description was he would have to teach about like what you guys are doing, instructional design type things. And he turned down, I offered him the job and he turned it down because he said he didn't think he could speak and teach. And I said, you know what, that's okay. If you will write the words and prepare the presentation, I will give it for you. If you give me a script and you will sit with me and tell me how to do this, I will speak for you. And I think and then he was in the project with us for 5 years. And by the end, he started out doing that. And then he would sit in a group. So he didn't have to stand up in front of everyone and speak from his seat. And then eventually I walked by a room and he was teaching teachers. And I do think you have to ask people ahead where they are at, if this gives them a terrible anxiety, and what would help them what would be the next step for them, and just let them take that step. If public speaking is a very important part of this class, even, how could they scaffold it so that they can get comfortable? Can they speak from their seat, whether it's recording, what would help? I think that's important. Oops, sorry.
I think that's a great point. And I actually am gonna turn it to Christine, who actually teaches public speaking, and ask you what are your thoughts on that as well. And I see that the chat is really blowing up, so I'm gonna try to see if I can catch up over there as well. But Christine, what are your thoughts?
Sure. No, I think that there's a few of us in here. I think that teach or have taught public speaking where, I love the suggestions that if your goal isn't to teach public speaking, then focus on the goal, right? Really scaffold the assignment, give choices. But in a course like public speaking, there's been so many times where I've had to kind of work specifically with students, similar to what Lisa was saying, and think about what's the scaffold to get them to where they want to go. And it really has to be an individualized experience, and setting it up that it's not one single person needs to, meet with me and have a different process, but that everybody let's talk about where we're all starting. Let's talk about where we're going to go next. Giving lots of options is definitely the way that I always approached it. The thing that I always kind of butted up against, and I'm curious about others' experience with this, is that the texts were very bad at being open to the fact that there are various ways to present. Like there's very simple and strict texts and rubrics for public speaking that are just kind of the accepted way that we consider public speaking to be done well. And I found it very difficult to find texts or examples that I could use that were already out there. A lot of it was kind of making it up myself. And so that was my experience. And a lot of it had to do with things like expectations around what you do with your body, expectations about eye contact, expectations about how loudly you speak, right? These things that are, you know, I had to do a lot of work in trying to revise what the text said about it. So I am curious about anybody's feedback on that or experiences that are similar.
I can drop something in the chat that's
Okay, so am I frozen or is everybody else frozen?
No, I was just reading through the chat first. Nobody's frozen.
Okay, thanks. I see people smiling, so I think Lisa may be frozen, but I did want to go back to Leo's point in the chat, what people are thinking about that, and maybe Lisa will get unstuck. Preparing students for the real world by having them do short presentations to build into a larger one. I really like this idea that you have and what you're doing there, Leo. Julia says the other thing that she does in class is give several opportunities for oral presentations, but calling them different things, such as discussion leader, Moodle coordinator of the day. I think that's a great way to get people comfortable. Julia, kind of like what Lisa was mentioning earlier. And Diana wrote, I think it's also important to offer these different choices when the assignment is presented, so a student does not have to come forward and say they're uncomfortable and then additional options for presenting become available. I guess that's part of the design part. It is. I love that you mentioned this, Diana. So when you bake this in the beginning, it doesn't seem like an add-on. So like I used to teach a critical thinking and information literacy course, and the students had to have a final project that they did in teams. Well, they could do an infographic, they could do a video, they could do a written paper, right? But they had the choice in how they wanted to do it based on who was in their group, right? And so that gave them an opportunity to be able to think about how they might go about that based on their comfort levels and what their strengths were in the course. And that worked out really well. Got some really cool projects. Jason, do you want to speak to your point? I also have terrible allergies right now, and so I feel my throat is drying up as the time keeps going.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that a lot of students generally, when they hear either presentation or group project, or both for that matter, combined, that there's immediately this palpable sense of resentment and not wanting to. And obviously we can make all the explanations we want, whether it's that, well, it's preparing you for, you know, committee work in your future profession, or there's actually, I think there's a Calvin and Hobbes comic about that, and you know, the students tend to not like it. So anybody can benefit from a really careful explanation of, you know, why the collaborative element, why we're doing it, as opposed to just, well, because it's the thing you do. But I would also encourage people to bear in mind that for neurodivergent folks, it's not all neurodivergent folks, obviously, but for certain areas on the spectrum, it can be especially challenging and often even like panic attack inducing. I have not personal experience with this, but a close relative who does, that where he can really spiral if he's expected to do something and it hasn't been made clear why he's expected to do it in that way. Like, you might think it would just be like, oh, that's annoying, or I got to do this thing, I don't even know why. But there's a close link between that, and again, in certain parts of the spectrum for some people, where that leads to not just frustration, but like panic and aggression in some cases, or just kind of spiraling. So establishing that link, whether it's in sort of, fairly open-ended, like, hey, this is an important professional skill, that's why we're doing it, or hey, I'll go to my field, in English, people often attend conferences where they collaborate on a presentation, and that's part of the professional development, or that's how big ideas in literary criticism are usually born, or whatever. And I can kind of try to sell it that way. The point is, the students don't have to agree that that makes it worthwhile, but having some sort of link there, I think, is very valuable.
I think that's a great point. And I know there's a lot of activity in the chat, and just so you all know, I'm trying to read them aloud so that everyone can hear what they are. Not that I don't know that, I know you know how to read, but for some people, they have a hard time keeping up with the chat. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm capturing all of those too. So the people that are writing in the chat, that their ideas are not lost to the group just because they are written and not being presented orally. So the next thing in the chat is from Courtney, and she says, also in the comm profession point of view, it is well documented that slide decks are a very ineffective way to have your audience retain your message. And Jason says that's intriguing. There's much data behind that. Julia says that she agrees with Jason and Becky about explaining the why in the women and gender studies. I talk about the why, and it's important, and it's so important to WGS. We're learning history and how voices have been silenced. We need to have practice. We need to practice having a voice. That seemed to work well with my WGS course. And they were also interested in what their peers were saying. So I think that's great. The last comment is from Becky, and it says that double-edged sword as detailed communication rubrics. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and they can get stuck on the one thing that they don't do well instead of improving on what they already do well in strength-based learning. What a great comment to kind of summarize and kind of wrap us up. We have about 3 minutes left. I do want to make sure that we get this micro lesson to you that Diana has spent some time on creating for you all. I think it's a wonderful takeaway. And so what I would like to do is put it in the chat for you all, but also have Christine bring it up. If you don't mind, Christine, so that people can see what it looks like. So when you click on the link, and you all can bookmark this or do whatever you would like with it, but it has some what we've talked about today, like all of the links that we put in the chat. So those are in the micro lessons, but it talks about what is neurodiversity in the beginning, and there's a video there for you. Of course, for those of you who have been with us in sessions 1 and 2, you heard from Diana and Jason more about neurodiversity, what it is not. And this micro lesson also has information on UDL, Universal Design for Learning. What is it? It has the +1 activity in there, and also that chart that Diana showed. And there is homework or downloadable PDF for you to be able to take with you to think about how you might do +1s in your own daily life. And I will say that +1s are not only for people that are, instructors, but those of us who are staff members. Some of us use +1s with our family members because, did I have the wrong link there to share out? Looks like I left some of it off. Sorry about that. Try this one. Did that work, Jim? Perfect. I see a head nod from, so I'm gonna say that must be the right link there.
Is that working? Okay.
All right, thanks.
So
Go ahead.
So I've got it pulled up here, and I'll just quickly just show you what Ericka has already just reviewed for us here. But this is a wonderful resource that Diana put together, and I'll bring us all the way sort of to the end of it here, where you see there's some resources that are linked. So towards the end, and then at the very end, we have a reflection section, right? That we hope this is a wonderful takeaway for you all after this session, thinking about those +1s. And so there's 2 buttons that you can click at the end. One outlines that strategy, and the last is this takeaway homework. That's a PDF, but you can also click the link here. And it's just a chance for you to reflect on something in your courses, brainstorm about what you might do, and think about how to implement it. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Ericka?
No, that's it. I do challenge you and encourage you within the next, for those of you who are teaching in the summer, which is very many of you, to think about doing a +1 in the first 2 weeks of your course. And if you do one, like, email us and let us know like what you do. We want to like hear what you're doing. And for those of you who are not teaching until the fall, I ask that you do the same. And for those of us who aren't teaching, think about how you might +1 in your daily activity. But the whole idea here is to think about multiple ways. Just really think about your audience and be intentional with it, instead of thinking that there's only one way to do it. My grandma always said there's one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And she's so right. And I think that's applicable to many things in life. And she is a woman of great wisdom. So I will leave us on that note. We so appreciate your time and your energy being a part of this series. I want to again thank you to Diana and Jason for having us, Diana and Christine and myself today, to be here to share about UDL. And that's it. That's all I have for today. I don't know if you have any final instructions, Christine.
My final instruction is just that if there are any specific questions that you do have, anything specific to your discipline that you want to send along to myself or Diana or anyone that's been presenting here today, you can do that, and we'll try to see if we can address them in the next session, okay? So thank you all so much for coming. Anything anybody else wanted to add there? Diana, Jason, anything?
No.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you. This is great.